live to my feed?
Should be able to. Yeah. Yep. Here we go. Hey guys, I want to welcome you guys to our Growth Stack Drive weekday live. I've got a special guest with me today, Mr. Jared Mirsky, who is absolutely crushing the entrepreneurial game. Jared, excited to have you this morning. Thank you for being a part today, man. Hey, I'd love for you to take just a minute, tell our audience a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what you've got going on right now.
Sure. And, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I'm Jared Mirsky, CEO and founder of Wick and Mortar. We were once just a small agency based out of Seattle with a dream of rebranding the cannabis industry one brand at a time. And to be honest, I had no idea it was going to morph into what it's morphed into. So, when I started in 2001, which is when I started my design career, because I'm 37 now. So this was right when I graduated high school. I was a designer. Fast forward, started my first agency, Mirsky Media. And then I really fell in love with what was to become this cannabis industry. It was very illicit when I started because it was really only 2000, probably 2008, 2009. 2009 was when I started my agency. And I'm really glad that I did, because a good friend had always told me that if I had an opportunity to develop a business within a niche, that I should focus on that and I should be fucking passionate about it. And by golly, I was pretty darn passionate about cannabis. I had grown some, I had sold some, and I had definitely smoked a lot. So I felt like I certainly knew the territory. And more importantly, it was a product that I had no problem designing for. Whereas for many other designers, creatives alike, the cannabis industry was extremely taboo. So, there weren't creatives entering into the space simply because they didn't have access nor any knowledge to it. Now, being from Washington State and also California, I had the ability to get kind of a first view on, what was happening in this industry to be and where would it go. So I've gotten to participate now in writing legislature for different, regulatory outfits specific to, helping brands within each respective state understand their packaging rules and regulations. And, I speak at like 50 to 100 conferences a year, and I get to write for all of these cool publications. And so it's been a really, really cool journey. And I'm just thankful and appreciative that I have such a large fan base that I do, because I'll be honest, for years and years and years, it's been me teaching the industry a lot about just the nuances and faux pas of the cannabis industry on a very high level. Whereas now I feel like I have the opportunity to get even more granular with respect to the knowledge I'm providing, simply because there are more educated people coming into the industry. Not that there weren't educated people in the industry before. It's just now there are more people from other industries with more life experience and work experience coming in, that makes it a little bit easier for me to do my job. And
Right. You said something just a minute ago, Jared, that I'd love to hit on real quick. My two main things I love to talk about are passion and purpose. Obviously, you've got a passion. I can feel and sense the passion that you've got.
Can I smoke a joint right now?
Come on, that's up to you, bro. That's completely up to you, my friend. That is completely up to you. So your passion that you have to do what you do obviously is there. I love just a minute ago on the entrepreneurial side where you said, where you really talked about purpose. Like you said, listen, I got into in the cannabis the industry and in the cannabis realm, and I really didn't know what it was actually going to do for me. Like you didn't. It's not like you came into. So a lot of entrepreneurs, and I think we miss this as entrepreneurs. A lot of entrepreneurs go into a field and they're like, Grant's whole mindset is global domination. We talked about Grant Cardone just a minute ago. He's a mutual acquaintance of both of ours. But you came into this not with this grandiose vision, or I'm going to build I'm going to build Wick and Mortar, and it's going to be the greatest branding design firm for cannabis or whatever industry. You just said, hey, here's a niche. You said it just a minute ago. I want to jump in and fill this space. And you can see in my 10X journal, where I write my goals down twice a day, you can see on the top here, it says, what problem am I going to solve today? I write that down every morning. What you did was you jumped in and you solved a problem you didn't have this grand vision of what you wanted to do. You just said, hey, there's a need and I'm going to fill it. And it kind of morphed over time. Talk to our audience about that.
Yeah, it was so I'd started Mirsky Media, and so I had already had a base understanding of what it takes to build an agency, and again a base understanding. I was 19, so
Right.
didn't have an understanding of just a base. But after having dipped my toes in the agency experience, not through having worked for any other agency other than the one I built for myself, because I never went to school, I never went to college, and I went to high school, but I barely graduated. Not that I wasn't smart, but I just didn't really care and didn't apply myself. And I wish I would have. But moving forward, my vision when I started, the agency was to change the perception of cannabis on a global level, one brand at a time. So yes and no. I didn't know that what I was starting would transcend into what is now this massive multi-billion-dollar industry. But I did have a vision of, how can I change the way the cannabis industry looks today? And today meaning 2009, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you walked into a dispensary, it looked like you're entering into a taboo video. It felt very unsettling, and it felt there was never anything that felt right about it. And because I was so in love with the plant, with the healing properties associated, and really with the opportunity of developing a naked industry into something that people can look at, go back and go, gosh, I'm really glad that Jared Mirsky was there to kind of help usher this industry into a design centric and value driven place. Because I'll tell you, a lot of the brands that exist in the cannabis industry today lack value-driven intentions. They really just live to serve the, shelf space. I love talking about this particular aspect of the industry, and that's really about what is the direction of where these brands are actually going, right? And when you look at, and I've kind of derailed a little bit, but
no, you're good. You're good.
When I really look at the opportunities that lie in this industry, we're interfacing with a situation where brands are trying to be everything to everyone. They've got one brand name and then they've got 20 products under the sun. Well, that's not how the traditional industry works, right?
Right.
You look at Hershey's. Hershey's was like, well, shit. My chocolate bars aren't selling across the world. They are, but we know we can capture a much larger market segment if we focus on developing niche market segments with respect to different product lines. So they developed Almond Joy and Kit Kat and all these other products. Well, what is the common thread that they all have that they all share? That's that they're made with Hershey's chocolate. So let's look at this from a CBD perspective. If let's just say your brand was Hershey's and your special formulation or ingredient was Hershey's chocolate, which is really cacao and other stuff, but nonetheless, that's your ingredient. What are you going to do? Are you going to make Hershey's one brand to rule them all? No, you're going to develop one brand with hero products and then develop other product categories and or product lines that are within the same category, but have their own niche focus. By doing this, it really gives you the ability to create far more leverage in your ability in an effort to become acquired or amplify the equity of your brand, because to a retailer, it appears as if you have more options, and optically to a consumer, it makes you look bigger. And more importantly, the confidence that a consumer obtains through the singularity, meaning the brand singularity of each product, is far more. I mean, I'll give you a really good example. If you're a pet lover and you own a dog or a cat, chances are you've purchased pet products for your animal before. And data shows that you're more likely to spend money on your pet than you are yourself when it comes to taking it to the vet or the hospital, hell, even feeding it sometimes. I put better food in my dog than I put in my own body. So if something happens, I'm on it. And if I find a product for my dog that works, you never leave it. So we tend to become one of the most loyal customers. So when you look at the customer type of a pet lover or a pet owner, they are very, very loyal. So if I was to look at now a brand that was also the same formulation sold to humans, I might not feel as confident in that pet brand because the same pet brand is also made for humans. That seems weird. However, if the brands were separate, if the pet brand, let's say for all intensive purposes, the ingredients were the same as in the pet as in the human, but because they're branded separately, optically, the consumer is still going to feel just as confident in the pet brand as the human brand versus as if they were all under the same brand name. You can't be everything to everyone, and you really lose a lot of customer loyalty when you start to spread yourself thin without doing a better job of segmenting based on that market segment. Because if you did it right and you built the consumer for the pet brand first, the customer acquisition cost would be far less because you've already created and commanded a much stronger and more loyal customer. So they're less likely to brand bounce.
Yeah, I love that. So when you got into the cannabis industry and you started doing what you were doing, what kind of resistance when you came in with that mindset into, I see you smiling already. What kind of resistance did you run into when you said, hey, here's a vision to be able to take this and do exactly what you just talked about as far as brand segmenting and the look from one person to the other person, from one brand to the other brand? What kind of resistance did you run into? And
I can't
how
afford
did you
that.
overcome? Right.
I can't afford it. So we had to be as extremely affordable as possible. I mean, there were points and times where I was like giving away my services. But I also knew that there was a means to an end, in the sense that if I touched enough people, my name would get out there enough, and I would be the guy. And I am, and that's great. And my company is the team to do it. And so, we've positioned ourselves as the, premier cannabis focused, CBD focused branding and marketing firm. So we'd certainly command a much higher price point now than we did before, especially when we started. I remember doing logos for $50. And now, we charge 35 grand for a full identity, which still for a niche focused agency is not a lot, given how niche and focused we are, especially because we save our clients so much stress, time, and money by helping them avoid all of these, faux pas. Now you said,
go ahead, Jared.
I was going to say, you mentioned something earlier, and that was, what kind of struggles did you have? And, one struggle that I had also was the fact that, my agency, and you may not know this, but when I started my agency, we were not called Wick and Mortar. We were called Online Marijuana Design. About as creative as the Dollar Shave Club in terms of the name.
You should have hired this guy named Jared Mirsky to
I know
your brand development. You'd have been good to go.
But it was intentional. Ken, because I knew that during a time like that, SEO was of the utmost importance, and a name like Online Marijuana Design, as far as a search query was concerned, ranked really, really well. And given the fact that we were working with business owners, myself included, who lacked, a tremendous amount of business acumen, right? Because we all just kind of jumped in, right? And I recognized that because, including myself, I even lacked a tremendous amount of business acumen. I needed to make sure that the name that I chose was so incredibly obvious, especially given the fact that cannabis companies during that time had access to no ancillary support. The only companies that really existed from an ancillary perspective was like High Times, hydroponic shops, and us. So it was a really interesting time, needless to say. But more importantly, once we recognized where the industry was heading, and 6 years later, 5 or 6 years later, we rebranded to Wick and Mortar, and now we've been around for 11 years.
Hey, you said two things just a while ago, and obviously we started this entire. We had planned a live event in Atlanta. It got booted. It was supposed to be May the 15th. Myself, David Pollack from ESPN's College Game Day, who's a real good friend of mine, Richie Dolan from 10X headquarters, all these other entrepreneurs that we had to kick it down the road because of COVID. And so we started the Instagram Live, started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we said, hey, let's start a YouTube channel. Let's bring it over, make it podcast form. Let's bring some people from different spaces in. we started doing this because we wanted to add value to people who were in the midst of this whole pandemic. You said something just a minute ago, and I'd love for you to elaborate on this just a second. For entrepreneurs who are either starting or have felt kind of got the wind kicked out of them through this whole pandemic, you said, you heard, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. I can't afford it. We were doing logos for $50. We were doing things for free. And this is what and then you said, I knew if I touched enough people. Talk about those. Those are huge business, transferable business principles that any entrepreneur literally can take and use. Talk about those two things and how much that would mean to any entrepreneur in any type of business or any space today.
I think it all boils down to, one thing, and that's, how can I add a value to others without expecting anything in return? And there's this golden rule that is quite unspoken, but I think it's obvious once you just become a good person and you practice that. And that's that if you're just good and you do good things, people want to reciprocate. And they tend to want to reciprocate even bigger, 10x style, because you were the one to initiate it. And more importantly, you become the person that they never forget.
Yeah, I love what Zig Ziglar says. If I help enough people get what they want, eventually I'll get what I want. And maybe it's Warren Buffett says a rising tide rises all boats. Hey, speak specifically to, because it's so hard sometimes, I think, for entrepreneurs who may be where you were at in 2010, 2011, where they're like, hey, I'm the guy doing $50 logos right now. I'm the guy that's doing podcasts for and just trying to get guys on. I'm the guy that's, selling real estate for the first time. And now it's in the middle of COVID. Talk to me about, and you, when you said, if I tell enough people, it reminded me immediately, we had a conversation off air about Grant Cardone, about massive action, about just taking massive action. Talk to me about that principle, regardless of what space that you might in taking massive action, and the wherewithal not to give up, but just keep pressing forward every day.
Yeah, I think I entered into a space, first of all, that was very untapped. And to this day, I think it's still very much in its infancy stage. And so I believe there's plenty of room for creatives alike to come in and build their own career in space. Now, the advice that I would give is, don't necessarily be too worried about the monetary value. Rather, be worried about, are people going to remember you? Are people going to talk about you? Right? So it goes back to the, adding value piece. But it also, but for me, it was also, making sure that I put myself out there. I didn't just become, a success overnight. They say it takes 10 years to have overnight success. And so what I did is I started writing about the subject matter in which I felt like I was an expert to talk about. And so by continuously and regularly producing and putting out content, I was then seen as the thought leader in the space surrounding branding and marketing within cannabis and CBD. Started speaking at conferences, doing blogs, and all of these things. Sometimes, and most often, that doesn't cost you anything other than your time. And if you're willing to donate your time to a conference that's perhaps up and coming, or to Ken, as we're talking live on Facebook today, to spread the word, so to speak. These are all unique opportunities that you have with other people to talk about what it is you love to do. And if you're passionate enough about it, people will probably hire you because they love working with passionate people. The other part, Ken, is the fact that, and this is one of my biggest passions, and this is team building. I love bringing people up. I love it. I love making people feel good about themselves. I love teaching people stuff. I was really fortunate to have had, and if Grant ever listens to this, he'll appreciate this, as well as yourself, when I was a graphic designer, I was also doing a lot of design work for real estate, commercial and residential, Sotheby's and Homes and Land Magazine, Distinctive Home Magazine, all of these different real estate companies. And it was pretty boring. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty boring. Wasn't the niche that I was, gravitated towards. But what I did learn was a whole hell of a lot about the real estate and, the commercial real estate game. And I find that if there is an area of business that you are focused on and that is exciting to you, make that your niche. But where I was going with this is I was very fortunate enough to have a best friend who believed in me, saw me, because I didn't see me. He saw me. My parents saw me. But when your parents tell you who you are and who you can be, you're like, okay.
They're supposed to do that.
They're supposed to do that. But when your friend tells you that, hey, Jared, look, you're pretty good at picking up. This was years ago. I have a girlfriend now, but he's like, Jared, you're pretty good at picking up chicks. That's not my strong suit. Tell you what, you teach me how to talk to chicks and I will teach you about business. I was like, deal all day long. So I quit everything I was doing and I moved into his house and he taught me about business for the next 6 months. So he's not only my best friend, but he became my mentor.
I love it.
And I was really young. I was, 20, right? And he took a chance on me. And I respect and appreciate him to this day. His name is Frankie Rangel, or Garcia rather. He's got 2 last names.
Did you teach him how to pick up chicks? Because obviously he taught you how to do business.
Actually, what's funny is the first woman I introduced him to, he married.
Nice.
They got divorced years and years later. The second chick I introduced him to, guess what happens?
They got married again.
They got fucking married again.
End of story.
True story.
Talk to me, Jared. We've got about 5 minutes left. Talk to me about team building, because that's something that I coach business owners across the country, even in Europe. And I do group online coaching for business owners on a Wednesday night. Actually tonight I'm talking about alignment, core values, how differing beliefs, conflict, clues, patterns, choice. I'm talking about all of the really organizational health keys tonight. Is what I'm doing with all my entrepreneurs tonight. Give our audience a couple things. Like if they're entrepreneurs, either they have a team or they're going to be building a team. Talk to me about 2 or 3 things you would say today and how you built your team there at Wick and Mortar. What are 2 or 3 transferable principles any entrepreneur can take away from today?
Yeah, I think the biggest is like, if you're going to bring a team on, make sure that there's a reason for them to feel confident in your ability to execute. Because if they don't feel confident and you've just scored a really great person, perhaps they're a unicorn, as I like to call them. I'm a unicorn collector myself. You may lose them because you don't have your shit together. So, I tend to approach things with a process-driven format, which means if I'm going to start any new endeavor that requires me to hire team members for any reason, internship, paid, whatever the case, if there isn't a cleared roadmap to growth or some sort of just guide overall with respect to understanding how that person is supposed to do their job, roles and responsibilities, things of that nature, it's going to be very, very hard to convince that person that they're there for a reason and they're there to scale with your company. So I think it also depends on, are you a startup? Have you been in business for a while? But at the end of the day, I think the best teams are built on transparency, trust, and loyalty. And for me, I find that because of what I do and how unique and different it is, it's also extremely fun. And I built this business that is, for a better lack of the word, a staple in the cannabis industry. We're one of the longest running cannabis brands, period, in the industry, ancillary or not. And that's pretty cool. And a lot of people want to get in front of that or behind that and on the side of it. And I love that too, because we get people applying every single day, at least 50 applicants a day, and so that's pretty crazy for a creative agency based out of Seattle.
Talk to me, transparency, trust, and loyalty. I love those 3 words. We've got 5 core values in all my companies: passion, focus, intentionality, flexibility, and teachability. Those are our things. Transparency, trust, and loyalty. Talk to us as we wrap up today. Talk to me about a difficult conversation in the last 6 months you've had to have with a team member, and kind of how you were able to communicate in such a way to be able to help that team member?
Let me reverse that and say this. During COVID, when business came to a near halt, not
Right.
one single one of my employees was at all worried about their paycheck. They told me, Jared, if we don't get paid for the next month or 2 months, don't worry about it. We know you got us. We're going to keep working no matter what. So I think it's a matter of what is it that you do to create an environment that provides you with such fucking, excuse my language, such amazing employees,
Right.
and team members. And I think it's when you practice those things that I mentioned earlier, you have people that are become your ride or dies because they just trust you. You have no reason to doubt you because you've been honest and you've been transparent.
Which is completely different than the corporate model in America from the 70s and 80s, which is why we're seeing, in the last 20 years, startups and Zappos and even Southwest Airlines, how they do things. And guys like Simonson and Patrick Lencioni, two of my favorite authors, start with why. Patrick Lencioni. So I love organizational health. And so when I hear guys like you talk about, and there is no greater feeling or no greater reward as an entrepreneur and a business owner when you go through what you went through. People go, hey, we know you got us.
Yep.
We're going to continue with the mission. We trust you. You've earned the right to be heard.
Yep.
Hey, final thoughts today, Jared.
Final thoughts. We've talked about a lot of really cool shit today, and I love the questions you've asked because, like always, very good. I do want to redirect all of Ken's fans, subscribers, and Ken fanatics. We need to come up with a name for your big fans. But I just launched a new YouTube series. Well, actually a channel with a number of different series on it. I've been uploading all of this video content over the last few days. So not many subscribers yet. Not many views yet. Again, just launched this YouTube like a few days ago. So check it out. Tons of new videos. You can also check me out on Instagram. If you want to know how to get verified on Instagram like myself, build a following like I have, please feel free to follow me on Instagram. Shoot me a DM. I'd love to give you some tips and tricks and notes as far as what I did and how I was able to build my personal brand. So thank you so much.
I love it, man. Hey, Jared, it's at Jared Mirsky on Instagram.
At Jared.Mirsky on Instagram. Yep. Mirsky. Yep. And then, you can check me out on LinkedIn, influencer on there as well.
And then on the YouTube, it's just,
what's that?
Yeah, that's what YouTube is, just Jared Mirsky, or is it Wick and Mortar? What's the best way?
We have our Wick and Mortar YouTube channel. But if you go in Google, since I don't have enough subscribers yet, I can't get my unique URL handle. So you're just going to have to go in there the old fashioned way and just type in Jared Mirsky, JARED. Mirsky. Simple enough.
Jared, thank you, man. I appreciate you being on today. Fun conversation, different conversation. But I love it.
The best kind, right?
Dude, I love it, man. I absolutely have met some phenomenal people in all kinds of different spaces. This is my first cannabis guy that I've interviewed. I will say that. But I tell you, the transferable principles, transparency, trust, loyalty. When I started, people said I can't afford it. I knew if I touched enough people, and you talked about adding value. I tell my real estate team, I've got a real estate team in Birmingham, Alabama, and a real estate team in Atlanta. I tell them all the time, listen, if you look at clients as through the lens of adding value and building relationships versus transactions, if you'll do that, you will make more money than you know what to do with in the real estate. Right. I've been in real estate for 20 years. And that's a transformative principle. I don't care if you're in the cannabis industry, in real estate, if you're selling cars, if you're selling whatever. If you'll add value and build relationships, man, you can do anything. Jared, again, thanks. You and I'll touch base offline. Hey, guys, thank you for being a part of our Grow Stack Drive Weekday Live. Tomorrow, I've got my friend David Meltzer is going to be on. It's going to be a phenomenal time and a great interview. Appreciate you being here today. You guys have a phenomenal day.